It began like so many other afternoons on a college campus, sunlight stretching across the walkways, the chatter of students echoing off buildings, and a feeling of routine in the air. Yet on this particular day at Utah Valley University, something extra stirred beneath the ordinary rhythm. A nationally recognized speaker had arrived, a figure who carried both admiration and controversy wherever he went. For weeks, posters had been taped to walls, and digital flyers had circulated online, promising an event that would challenge opinions and spark heated conversations. As students gathered in the courtyard, the mood was electric. Some carried notebooks, ready to jot down key points or clever arguments. Others had their phones out, cameras already rolling in hopes of capturing a viral moment. Supporters wore confident smiles, eager to cheer for someone who reflected their beliefs. Critics stood just as firmly, prepared to raise sharp questions and challenge every word. Even those without a strong opinion came, drawn by curiosity and the chance to witness a clash of ideas unfold live. The scene had all the markings of a classic campus debate. Bright banners hung from tables, volunteers handed out pamphlets, and laughter mingled with the hum of serious conversation. A few students leaned against railings at the edge of the quad, preferring to observe quietly from a distance. Others pressed closer, jostling for a front-row view. It was the kind of event that promised not just education, but entertainment, something to talk about over dinner or post on social media later that night. Everything seemed to point toward a spirited but predictable afternoon. After all, this was what universities were meant for: exchanging ideas, debating issues, and learning through discussion. But beneath the buzz of energy, there was also a subtle edge. The kind that comes when strong opinions meet head-on in a world already divided. The students couldn't have known it yet, but the afternoon would soon be remembered not for the arguments made or the points scored, but for a disruption that would ripple far beyond the boundaries of the campus. Because just as the conversation began to peak, something completely unexpected happened. As the debate heated up, the atmosphere in the courtyard felt like a spark waiting to catch fire. Voices clashed in real time. Supporters cheering, critics shaking their heads, and curious onlookers leaning forward to catch every word. The speaker's presence had drawn a large and lively crowd, and each question from the audience seemed to build more momentum. It was the kind of campus moment that students would normally laugh about later with their friends, a story for social media, or a clip to share online. Then, without warning, the energy shifted. What had been an ordinary debate suddenly froze in place. Conversations cut short mid-sentence. Laughter stopped, and heads turned in every direction as something disrupted the flow. At first, it wasn't clear what had happened. Students exchanged uncertain glances, some shrugging, others whispering nervously. For a few seconds, it almost seemed like part of the performance, as if the event had been staged to catch the crowd off guard. But as the silence grew heavier, the mood transformed. Nervous laughter gave way to unease. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Is this real? What's going on? The longer the confusion lasted, the more unsettling it became. Students who had arrived eager for debate now found themselves caught in a situation that felt entirely different from what they had expected. The shift was subtle, yet undeniable. What moments earlier had felt like a lively college event now felt uncertain, unpredictable. Everyone in the courtyard understood that something had broken the rhythm, and they were about to find out just how serious it was. And while students stood frozen, security wasted no time responding. Almost immediately, campus security and event staff sprang into action. Their voices rose above the noise, giving clear instructions. Move back, stay calm, don't rush. Hands gestured toward open pathways, and students were directed away from the scene. What had started as a casual gathering now turned into a carefully orchestrated evacuation. It wasn't perfect. Some students panicked, stumbling in different directions, while others pulled out their phones to film what was happening. But overall, the response was swift and professional. Officers shielded the speaker, staff ushered attendees toward safety zones, and within minutes, the chaotic buzz of the courtyard gave way to a structured flow of movement. From the outside, it almost looked like a drill, one that no one had expected but everyone was now living through. And while order was slowly being restored, one thing was certain: the day's original purpose had completely vanished. The focus was no longer on debating ideas, it was on understanding what had just disrupted the event. And as calm began to return, the questions grew louder than ever. By the way, if this story has you hooked like half the students in that courtyard, maybe hook us up too. Smash that like button and subscribe. It's the only kind of disruption we'll actually enjoy. Even as security moved quickly, The crowd was buzzing with uncertainty. Students whispered to each other, trying to piece together what had just occurred. "Was this real?" one student muttered. Others asked if it was part of the program, or if someone had staged a prank. The lack of answers made the moment feel even heavier. Phones lit up across the courtyard as students texted friends, parents, and classmates who weren't there. Social media apps filled with short posts like, "Something just happened at the Kirk event," and "Not sure what's going on, but it's serious." Within minutes, clips and photos began to spread far beyond the campus, feeding speculation that grew faster than the facts could catch up. Confusion was the only constant. Students didn't know whether to head home, stay put, or gather information. Professors nearby urged calm, but even they didn't have answers. What everyone could feel was that something unusual had shaken what should have been an ordinary event. And while students searched for clarity, investigators were already stepping onto the scene. The campus quickly shifted from an open debate space to an active investigation site. Law enforcement vehicles pulled into the lot, lights flashing against the backdrop of brick buildings and wide walkways. Officers moved with purpose, speaking into radios, marking boundaries, and documenting the scene with photographs and notes. Students watched from behind barriers, their curiosity colliding with unease. Every movement of the investigators hinted at how serious the disruption was. Clipboards filled with names and statements as witnesses were asked what they saw and heard. Some students spoke confidently, while others admitted they could barely remember details through the rush of adrenaline. Reporters arrived just as the sun began to lower, microphones in hand, eager for a soundbite. The presence of national outlets signaled that this was no longer just a campus concern. It had become a story the whole country wanted to understand. Yet, even with all the attention, officials refused to give premature answers. They promised thoroughness over speed, knowing speculation was already spreading online. But even as investigators searched for answers, voices of leaders far beyond the campus began to rise. By the evening, statements from state and national leaders poured in. The governor expressed deep concern and assured residents that every possible resource was being deployed. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle echoed the same sentiment. What happened at Utah Valley University was troubling and demanded answers. Social media platforms became arenas of debate. Hashtags tied to the event trended across the country, with thousands of posts every minute. Some expressed sympathy for the community, others pointed to broader issues about safety in public spaces. The reactions weren't uniform, but they all carried the same underlying theme. This moment was too important to ignore. Cable news ran wall-to-wall coverage, looping the same clips taken by students and witnesses. Anchors speculated about what the disruption meant for future political events, and panels of experts dissected the broader implications. What was once a localized incident had now sparked a national conversation on security, free speech, and the fragile balance between the two. And while the nation debated, those closest to the event, the students, were left to process what it meant for their daily lives. For the students at Utah Valley University, the experience was unlike anything they had ever imagined. Many of them had shown up expecting an afternoon of spirited debate, maybe even a chance to challenge the speaker directly. Instead, they were now walking back to their dorms and apartments with a story that felt larger than themselves. It wasn't just that the event was interrupted, it was the sudden realization that even familiar spaces like their own campus could feel uncertain. In dining halls and study lounges that evening, conversations circled back to the same moment again and again. Some students admitted they felt nervous to return to the courtyard where the disruption had taken place. Others compared the experience to something out of a movie, unreal, dramatic, and hard to process. Friends replayed the incident on their phones, pausing at certain moments and pointing out details they hadn't noticed before. Every angle seemed to spark a new round of questions. Why did it happen here? Could it happen again? Professors, too, struggled with how to approach the subject. Some faculty members began their classes the next day by opening the floor for discussion, letting students share what they felt and saw. Others avoided the topic altogether, trying to keep their lessons on track. But no matter how hard anyone tried to return to normal, the disruption hung in the air like a cloud, impossible to ignore. The university administration worked hard to reassure the community. Official emails were sent to every student, outlining safety procedures and providing resources for counseling. Campus leaders emphasized that security was being reviewed and that every measure would be taken to prevent future disruptions. Still, the words on a screen could only do so much. What students truly wanted was peace of mind. something far harder to provide after such a shocking transition. And while the university scrambled to restore a sense of calm, the rest of the country was still reacting in waves. Long after the courtyard had emptied and the campus lights flickered on, the echoes of what happened at Utah Valley University continued to spread. News outlets across the country dedicated entire segments to the disruption, looping footage captured by students and replaying witness accounts. Morning talk shows, late-night panels, and online commentators all weighed in, each adding their own interpretation of what the event symbolized. To some, it was a story about safety. To others, it was about free speech and the fragile balance of open dialogue in a divided world. Families far from Utah followed every update, not because they were connected to the university, but because the incident felt symbolic of something bigger. Parents asked if their children were safe attending events like these. High school students scrolling on their phones wondered if this was what college life had become. Debates that didn't just end with applause or disagreement, but with interruptions that rattled entire communities. The story also took on a second life online. Short clips of the disruption went viral on TikTok, Instagram, and X. Some videos had dramatic captions, while others were slowed down, analyzed frame by frame. Every angle sparked new discussions, and within days, the campus incident had turned into a national conversation piece, shared by millions who hadn't even been there. And while the attention faded in and out of the headlines, the conversation never truly ended. For many, the disruption wasn't just about one event, one speaker, or one school. It became a symbol of the uncertainty that hangs over public life today, a reminder of how quickly the ordinary can shift into the extraordinary, and how moments of confusion can unite or divide depending on how we respond. And yet, even with the media frenzy quieting down, the memory of that day still lingers on campus. In the end, what happened at Utah Valley University was more than just a sudden disruption during a campus event. It became a mirror reflecting the challenges of our time. How divided conversations can be, how quickly ordinary moments can shift into history-making ones, and how deeply a single afternoon can leave its mark on an entire community. What began as a routine stop on a speaking tour turned into a turning point that forced people, both inside and outside the university, to reflect on where we are as a nation. For the students who were there, the memory will last far beyond their college years. They will remember the sound of the crowd going silent, the rush of confusion, and the feeling of being part of something larger than themselves. For them, this wasn't just another lecture or debate. It was a moment that tested their sense of safety and reshaped how they viewed public life. For families watching from afar, it became a reminder of the world their children are stepping into, a world where free speech, safety, and public dialogue are constantly tested. And for the nation, the story didn't simply fade away. It entered the larger conversation about what it means to gather, to speak, and to disagree in today's climate. It raised questions that can't be answered overnight. How do we protect open dialogue while ensuring security? How do we create spaces where ideas can be shared without fear? And perhaps most importantly, how do we move forward when moments like this remind us just how fragile our sense of normalcy can be? As the headlines moved on and new stories took their place, the echoes of that day in Utah remained. A simple campus event became a chapter in the broader story of a divided but determined nation. And while students eventually returned to the courtyard, carrying their books and chatting with friends, they knew the space would never feel quite the same again. Because sometimes history doesn't arrive with warning. It interrupts without notice, leaving lessons that last long after the crowd has gone home.